Okay, let's talk about what we're up to today. So, it is the last day of the plants unit, believe it or not. Blasted through that pretty quick. So we talked about all the major structures of the plant: the leaf, the root, the stem, not quite as complex as animals, and the flower. So they're sexual reproductive organs, at least with certain types of plants. Not every plant is flowering, obviously, but and we talked about the function, of most of the structures therein. Today, we're going to be looking in a little bit more detail at the reproductive strategies of plants. So obviously we looked at the flower yesterday, which is the primary sexual reproductive process or organ for angiosperms. This video here goes into a little bit more detail. By this video, it's not on the screen. Give me one sec. Sorry. Okay, so you're going to start off, watch this video. It goes over the reproductive strategy called alternation of generations. Alternation of generations is a basic plan for sexual reproduction in plants. And all plants follow the same general plan, which is that you have a gametophyte, which is a diploid organism. Okay, so a plant, an adult plant. And the adult plant is going to produce sporophytes. That's what they're called in every plant, which are haploid organisms, okay, which would be pollen or pollen-like substance is essentially the sperm, the male component. And then the female component, which is egg-like, okay? Those are the sporophytes, okay? They're haploid. Those are going to be sent out into the world using some strategy depending on the type of plant, which when we talked about flowering plants and pollinators, we also talked about gymnosperms and just like throwing it up into the air for the pollen component. And then other types of plants use other strategies. They drop it into the water or whatever. That's what ferns do. So there's various ways to scatter your sporophytes, but eventually they're going to come into contact with each other somehow, okay? And that differs depending on the type of plant, but usually the male sporophyte, which is often pollen, is going to grow some kind of a tube into the female sporophyte, okay? Which we talked about that yesterday, the idea that the pollen lands on the top of the stigma, and then it's going to grow a pollen tube down through the style and into the egg. So that's typical for flowering plants, but there's other strategies. But the male usually does some type of growth and grows into the female component, and then that's where their DNA is united into a single nucleus, and then it begins growing a brand new gametophyte again. Okay, so then at that point it becomes a gametophyte again, and the seed matures, it germinates, forms a young plant, which grows into an adult plant, and then it produces sporophytes again. So that's why it's called alternation of generations, because it's alternating between being a sporophyte and being a gametophyte. And then it's a sporophyte again, and then it's a gametophyte. And it keeps alternating between those two. And all plants have that same basic plan, although how they accomplish each of those steps is different depending on the type of plant. Okay? So that's basic sexual reproduction. This video gets into a little bit more detail and talks about what those plans look like for a bunch of different types of plants. Okay? So it's going to go into that in a little bit more detail, this idea of alternation of generations. And then it spends a little bit of time discussing asexual reproduction. So I'm not going to get into it now, but again, we talked about this idea of cutting. Some plants will grow off of the root, a brand new plant. But in that case, it's asexual because it's just a clone. And I mean, depending on how you look at it, you could think of that plant as being potentially part of the original organism. I mean, it is technically connected to the original organism. So there are a lot of plants that grow like that. I think a number of people, is anybody doing bamboo for their plant project today? So if you're considering doing bamboo, that's their primary method of reproduction, is to grow off of the root of the previous plant. They don't actually do a whole lot of sexual reproduction. They can do it, but they mostly are growing through off of the root. So that's one strategy. There are others. The video goes through the other ones. And it also talks a little bit about farming practices and about scions. The idea that, you guys might not be aware of this, but like for example, fruit trees, where you get your apples from, those are not, you don't just plant a new apple tree with a seed for each apple tree. What they do is they grow a stem, which is genetically unique. You can just plant seeds to get the stems. And then they take cuttings from an adult apple tree that is already in existence, that is a good apple. It makes a good apple. And then they graft that onto the stem. So they cut the original stem and they graft that on. And the purpose of that is that basically every fruit tree, at least at the stem, is genetically identical. And so there's some positives and negatives to that. The positive of that is that your apples are all the same. If you want to make like a red delicious, you want like every single apple to be a perfect red delicious. They're all the same. They all taste the same. They all look the same. And that's how you get that. You essentially clone apple trees. That's what's done. So every apple you're eating is really, if it's the same type of apple, it's really coming from the same tree. It's coming from a clone of the same tree. We do the same thing for bananas and all kinds of crops, actually. Certain crops we don't do that because it's too difficult to graft, like tomatoes and things like that. But a lot of fruit trees are grafted. So we're actually eating like genetically clonal apples. Like they all have the same DNA in them, every apple that you've ever eaten, probably, if it was the same variety, which is kind of weird. But anyway, that's a strategy, and that's a type of clonal reproduction as well. That's human-assisted clonal reproduction, but that can also be done. So, like I said, you're going to read this little or watch this little video. It goes through a little bit of that. Any new vocabulary, add it to your plant vocabulary list. Things like alternation of generations, gametophyte, sporophyte. These would be good things to add to your vocabulary list. Then you're going to do your own research, and you're going to answer the question at the bottom of page 16. I believe the question is discussing how you actually propagate things through scions, which is what I was just talking about, which is grafting. I'm just going to get you to do your own research and look into that process, okay, how it's actually done. There are a couple questions that you do, page 594, numbers 1 and 5, and then there's a little practice quiz at the end. And that's plants. That's all we're going to do. I mean, honestly, guys, we covered the basics, so you're set to start pretty much any university botany course at this point. You have all the basics of what you need to know about a plant, so which is good. It's a good place to start. The rest of your time today, once you're done that, you're going to be using to work on the importance of plants presentation that you're going to do. So you can choose a plant. If you are having trouble finding any information on your plant, you don't know what plant to pick, you're not sure if what you're discussing about your plant is what I'm looking for, let's talk, okay? Just send me an email, or if you're at home, we can chat, or in the room, you can actually talk to me. It's a plus of being in the room. Really quickly, I did post a exemplar for this assignment. Pull it up here. So this is a presentation from last quad that is a great example of a presentation that includes all of the required information. So if you're curious like what a level 4 presentation looks like that has all the proper pieces, have a look at it. I posted it there for you. You're welcome to take a look. Don't use that presentation, but it is a good general overview. It includes an appropriate amount of detail for all of the different sections. It's a little on the long side. It's about 10 minutes. I will say that for your medical technology presentations and for the Meiosis Live ones as well, they were on average about 10 minutes long. Just keep in mind that that's like 6 hours of presentation watching from my end, which, you know, it's lovely. It's nice to see your work and such. That's extremely long amount of time for me to watch videos. 6 to 7 minutes would be ideal. If you're pushing past 7, you probably have information there that you don't need. This presentation has information in it that is not required. It has a little bit of extra, which, again, if it's outside of what's being asked for in the instructions, you don't have to include it, okay? So you don't need to include it just like for funsies. I do watch your presentations very carefully. That's why I'm still marking the Meiosis Live presentations, is because I watch them all. So I'm on like hour 5 or something, 4.5. And then after I watch the videos, I still have to take 10 minutes to go through and assess your assignment. So, so it actually ends up taking me like 12, 13 hours. And I'm not complaining. That's totally fine. But just try and keep the timing within a reasonable area. Like 6-7 minutes is great. I've had people that are breaching 15 minutes. Once we get into that area, then I'm not gonna lie, it just become a little bit of a drag on my part. I do have to watch all of these. 15-minute presentation is like way beyond what is a good idea for you to submit, okay? So just as a heads up, I'm not saying like, I don't wanna give you a hard time, okay? I appreciate the effort, I really do. But try and be a little concise and keep her somewhere around 7 minutes, just for my sanity, please. Okay, anyway, let me know if you guys need anything at all right? But watch that video, and I'll let you get to work. Get out of your hair. One more thing. The quiz is today. I think it's open right now, so technically you can complete it anytime you want. Please keep in mind that it is an open book quiz, okay? Have your book open. If you don't understand a word that's in the quiz, Google it. This is like straight open book, guys. You can use Google. I didn't take these questions directly off the internet, so there is no way to Google the question and get the answer directly. All right, so, but if you need vocabulary or you want to look back in your notes or whatever, please do that, okay? That's totally open to you, and the quiz is written with the intent that you can do that, okay? All right, just so you know. So at some point before midnight would be ideal. Please don't do it don't do it after midnight tomorrow. Before midnight tomorrow, okay? It would be like try and make that your hard deadline. Okay. Okay, as usual, if you're showing up late, to post in the chat. So, any questions from the first half about sexual reproduction, alternation of generations, asexual reproduction methods? No. Okay. Anybody have any questions about the project? What you need to do? Everybody's got a good plant that they want to do? Cool. Okay. If anyone at home has any questions, don't be afraid to let me know. I'll let you use the opportunity to work. If you're done everything, you can just write your quiz too if you want, or if you just want to write the quiz while you're here, go for it. Feel free. Good luck, and if you remember that if you have any problems with the quiz, if you're for example, you've done a question, you think there's a mistake with the question, or you just remember to write down the entire question, not just the number, because they're randomized. So if you say like question 5, like I don't know what question 5 is. So, but if you write down the actual question, I can go back and double check and make sure everything's cool. I have updated them from previous, and I've modified them, and sometimes I do change answers if things are unclear for people. So just as a heads up, let me know if you're having trouble. All right, good luck.